Today we are visiting Trerice, an Elizabethan manor house situated near Newquay. The stunning manor house is surrounded by equally lovely gardens, which we will explore later in this video. Trerice was built between 1570 and 1573. The house itself is a bit of a time capsule reflecting the different owners. However, the main family were the Arundells, who had become well established by the 16th century. John, 2nd Baron Arundell, married Margaret Acland in 1675, and it was through this marriage that eventually led the Acland family to inherit Trerice. When the property was inherited by the Acland family, they mainly used the Great Hall for entertaining guests. Although Sir Thomas Dyke Acland never lived at Trerice, he often stayed there during his visits to Cornwall. The National Trust acquired the house in 1953, and at that time the Elton family had become tenants of the property and had made several changes to the building, including restoring the northern part of the east wing, which had fallen into disrepair. The Eltons wanted to give the house the feel of a family home, something which was less important to previous owners because they were not as present within the manor. The house now holds many collections, including 17th to 19th century furniture, clocks, of which I have been told there are 17 in the house, paintings and embroidered pictures. As we've been exploring here, we are now in the Great Hall, which dates back to 1572. The hall reflected the wealth and power of the owners and was often used for banquets and for entertaining guests. The window in the Great Hall is a standout feature of the room. It holds 576 tiles of 16th to 19th century glass. You can see where broken glass has been repaired, which I think gives it an additional charm. To save the original glass when it has been broken, where possible the panes have been repaired and not replaced. We now move into the drawing room, which has a really homely feel and has been furnished as an early 19th century drawing room. In Tudor times, this room was only accessible from the kitchen. It was potentially where the servants slept. The room has been changed a lot over the years. There have been additions of a staircase and door. The room was divided into a breakfast room and dining room, and in the 1960s the National Trust restored the room to its original dimensions. The views out of these really pretty windows are absolutely stunning, and we will be exploring these gardens a bit later in the video, so keep watching. This sofa dates back to the 1930s. You can see the original colour here, but over the years light damage has meant it has faded to a pale pink colour. The fabric is also broken down due to leaning and brushing against it, as well as the light weakening the fabric. The frame is also very unstable. We now enter the bedroom. This was such a beautiful painting on display as you enter the room, and the room is really stunning with its furniture and large fireplace. It's really cosy but quite dramatic at the same time. I was told that the upstairs rooms have the original ceilings and they are absolutely beautiful. Here we see the Tudor bed. This bed is made from oak and dates from 1600. It was gifted to the National Trust in the 1980s. However, it did not display at Trerice until 2022. It was loaned to East Risildon Hall as at the time the National Trust acquired the bed, the room intended to display it was occupied by a tenant. As we saw in the old post office video, the bed base is made up of ropes in a crisscross fashion which needed to be tightened, hence the phrase sleep tight. Here we are now in the long gallery. Originally it would have been much longer than it is now, and probably used for indoor exercise, games and to display paintings. There are many paintings displayed in the corridor today which you will see some of, and the beautiful ceiling that you see was replaced in the 1840s but using a previous design. We are now in the court chamber in the north wing. During the 19th century, the north wing was not in a good state, and by 1883 the rooms in the north wing had badly deteriorated, ultimately being pulled down. John Elton set to rebuild the north wing in the early 1950s when the Elton family were tenants here. Building work here was completed in 1958 and designed as a family home for the Elton family to live. It was then designed as several rooms. However, in Tudor times it probably would have been one large room. The rebuilding of the north wing in the 1950s meant that Trerice retained its former greatness. We now head into what is probably my favourite room in the house, the bathroom. Imagine having a view like this from your bathroom window. Now in the north chamber, we enter a much more modern room compared to some of the other rooms that we have visited. This room was the Elton family's drawing room in the 1950s. You can use the seating here to sit down and read about the history of Trice. We're now heading outside and on to explore the second-hand bookshop, followed by the beautiful gardens. I hope you enjoy having a look around.
Welcome to the echo point at National Trust, Trice. You are calm. Please listen carefully to my voice and follow the instructions. We will be your guide. We will help you control your breathing and help you to relax. You will repeat this in cycles of 4 while you listen to the calming sounds. When you hear the fireplace shovel, breathe in. When you hear the clock, hold your breath. When you hear the caling pins, breathe out. Breathe in. Hold your breath. Breathe out. You are safe. Breathe in. Hold your breath. Breathe out. You are safe. Breathe in. Hold your breath. Breathe out. You are safe.